So what was your initial reaction when Commissioner came to you with the idea of the academic consortium?
Well, it was clear it was a good opportunity to feature our universities and some of their success stories that were separate from athletics through the athletic conference. And I didn't know how we were going to operationalize this concept, but I had an understanding that there was a great opportunity to use the athletic platform to better feature our universities.
When we visited with him, he talked about the CIC model and really only having that to go on, and then looking forward to ways to maybe tweak that. The question that I would ask you is, you were there at the beginning, you're there now, 10 years later. What have you seen as an evolution over that time?
Well, we started, it's true, with a focus on what the Committee on Institutional Cooperation had achieved over a 50 or 60 year history. And with our provost, we walked a little bit into other consortia and what models might exist for some academic collaboration, but focused really on that CIC model. And I think we learned over the first 3 or 4 years that maybe the vision that was appropriate 50 or 60 years ago was likely not the most appropriate direction for us in the Southeastern Conference today. And some of that learning allowed us to inform some decisions about new programs. Yet, I think there's been some things that have worked really well based on what we did learn from others who've walked this path previously.
At the beginning, after he came and told you what the idea was, what was your role in bringing that idea to life?
Probably my initial role is just to ask some clarifying questions, but quite quickly the startup effort focused on our provosts and gathering the provosts of our 12 universities at the time together for a conversation about starting an academic consortium across the conference. And my role really was in coordinating meetings. I became quickly the liaison to our provosts. Did a lot of paperwork about how do we start this up, worked with the director of the Committee on Institutional Cooperation to have her visit with our provost and actually to send a team to Illinois for a further conversation and the ability to see actually what it is they do. And a lot of that model is what formed the basis for how we started. And you know, in the early days we walked through some of the incorporation, licensing issues about logos, just things that aren't that interesting yet were fundamentally important.
If I may take a little liberty, what did you learn in those meetings with the provost compared to perhaps a meeting with a group of soccer coaches?
Well, I learned they were very focused on the opportunity presented for them from an academic perspective through the conference's introduction of the consortium. I don't think I've ever been with a soccer coaches or any coaches meeting talking about a consortium. That word's never come up. And a great deal of interest about how we might use the concept, the consortium concept, to develop future academic leaders in particular, and how we could create sharing among our schools through this competitive conference. And when you're in a coaches meeting, there's a lot of talk about competitive issues as opposed to collaborative issues.
Well, and that's interesting because you talk about conferences, and by all accounts, the Southeastern Conference is the first to have brought in-house, day in and day out, an academically focused initiative. There's been some conversations that we've had with other folks around the country about what we're doing, why we're doing it. Do you think it's something that we may see start to evolve with some other leagues with the whole idea of an academically focused program of some kind, however it might fit that particular league?
We are continually challenged now to present why this unique blend of intercollegiate athletics fits within the context of our universities. And I think while it was not the motivating factor for creating the consortium, at least from our perspective, it certainly is a complement to the educational efforts that go on every day on our campuses and involving our student athletes. And I would expect, just like we've seen a handful of conferences reach out and ask, you know, what are you doing and how might I replicate that, just as we did when we started the consortium, that there'll be continuing interest. I don't think it'll be necessarily universal, because some of these issues likely don't reside in the offices of other conferences. But some of the questions and the acknowledgement there's opportunities, I do think those will exist.
Is that positive?
I think anytime you can create some momentum around the academic setting through intercollegiate athletics, that's positive. And it certainly seems that any of the questions we've had from others about adopting a similar consortium type approach or introducing a new academic model into an athletic conference setting, I think that is positive.
What's been SECU's biggest success?
I think there are a lot of successes, but if I was to have to evaluate one in particular, I think the Academic Leadership Development Program, which was one of the first initiatives. There was a vision communicated through our provosts 10 years ago. It has stood, even though it's a relatively short test of time, it has stood the test of time. It's a program that still exists, and I think as you really look at the next iteration, the next vision for the Academic Leadership Development Program, we now have 14 great universities, and we can populate this country's campuses with leaders who have shared an experience in the Southeastern Conference, who have been developed through the program that SECU offers, who have interacted with our provosts and deans and chancellors and presidents and a number of our campus leaders. And I think that really has incredible value, so that we're not simply this distant entity that's focused on simply for football victories, which football victories are important to us, but as we've already seen, provosts and presidents spring out of both our provosts and from some of those who've gone through the Academic Leadership Development Program. I think that's critically important both now and long-term in the future.
What is the next version of SECU? What does it look like?
Well, I'm curious to see how we might foster even greater collaboration across our campuses academically. And I think we've seen some of that emerge in recent years with faculty grants and some of the competitive endeavors in a positive way that involve, for instance, our MBA students. I think there are models that we can replicate and increase the frequency of the collaboration. I'm also interested in seeing if some of the things we're encountering in intercollegiate athletics, we can inform ourselves and learn from the research that's taking place really organically on our campuses around issues. And we've got great medical schools. What aspects can they bring to this conversation? Is there an opportunity for our academic symposium to migrate over to focus once in a while on some of the issues in intercollegiate athletics? I think that's a natural forum, and we've got experts that are working on those issues both in this office and our campuses outside of our athletic departments on a daily basis. I also think it's really fascinating to see how we've been able to reach out across the country through a coordinated admissions effort and presenting our universities collectively to people. The brand, the Southeastern Conference, has great meaning and great value, and I think we can magnify the interest in that brand, that image, while also attracting people to ask about what's happening on our campuses and benefit from our campuses directly through that collective effort.